guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to make another cat face cake. So I do have a few different cat videos, some 3D ones, face ones, and also some cake toppers. This one's my grumpy cat. So I'm just going to take a cake. I've got a 10-inch cake here and I've got a thin card that's the same size. I've cut it into 3 and we're just going to put buttercream between each of the layers. I've gone for a pink buttercream. I've used the Colour Mill for this. Just because it's an oil-based colour, it's quite good for buttercream. It's also quite good for chocolate. But you can use any kind of food colouring you want. If you want to change the colour of your buttercream, that is. So I'm not going to go too thick with it because I don't want to squeeze it out the side when I'm doing all the work on the face itself. Okay, so I wanted to design my cat. I wanted to keep it fairly round, but I think I still need to cut some off to shape the face. So what I've done is drawn on the back of my cake card, and it's quite a thin card this, so I can cut it easily. I've just drawn roughly what I want the cake to look like. It actually looks a little bit like the Clawhauser cake that I did. I did that one a while ago. I'll see if I can put a link in the corner of the screen for you guys for the Clawhauser video as well. So it's almost like a wide triangle I've taken off from each top side. And then what I've done is cut that out of the card and then cut the same off the cake. So use the card as a template to cut it off the cake. And then we're going to start carving in a bit of shape. So I want the top of the head to set back a little bit further. And I really want to curve all the edges. I'm going to remove triangle-ish shaped pieces for the eyes. They don't have to be triangles, guys. I just need a dip where each eye is. And then use some of the cake offcuts for the nose. And then I'm going to cover the whole thing in buttercream. Now, if you want to use ganache, you're absolutely fine to use ganache instead of buttercream. For some of the 3D sculpted ones, if they're not too tall, then buttercream is my preference because I can push it around under the fondant and it stays fairly soft. If I'm doing something taller that needs a bit more stability, then I would swap to ganache. So I've gone over it not very neatly. And then what I'm going to do is scrape around it with a flexible smoother. So if I bend the smoother, I can scrape the rounded edges a bit easier. Now I'm going to put that in the fridge, and while that's setting in the fridge, I'm going to just put some lettering on a board. So I've got a board here. I think it's about 14-inch board actually. It's quite a big board. And I've covered it in black fondant. And then what I wanted to do is just use the letter set that I've got. And this is a Sweet Stamps letter set that I've got here. And I'm just going to push the letters in. I feel like I should leave the letters on. The letters are a nice colour, but they are plastic and you don't want to leave them on your cake. So I'm just going to press them in. Where my fondant has kind of come up a little bit and a bit bumpy, I'm just pressing it down with my smoother. Don't rub it, just gently press it. And then we can fill the letters in with colour. So I'm going to paint them. I've got an edible pale pink. And I'm just mixing them with some dipping solution. So you can use clear alcohol or lemon essence. And I'm just trying to flood or paint in those letters. Now I do actually have easy pour bottles, I think they're called, which have got a tiny spout and you can fill them with paint and drop it into the letters. I don't actually know where I've put my bottle. Otherwise I would have used it in this video to show you guys. Any untidy bits, what I've done is I've actually just used a black pen and coloured back over to neaten them up a little bit with it being black on the board. Okay, so this one I'm using this, I think it's like a coffee colour. Latte, it's called Latte. What I'll do, guys, is I'll put links below the video to everything that I've used. I do sell most of the products in my shop, so it will take you to my page. But that's if you want to know like the exact products I've used for this. I've rolled it thin, but not ridiculously thin, because when we put lines and things in, it's going to cut through the fondant if I'm not careful. So I've pressed in the eye sockets first, and then I'm going to push around the edges, smoothing it down a little bit. Little bumps I'm not too worried about because we're going to be texturing the whole face, so it's not important that it's super smooth on this one. If we weren't giving it lots of hairlines, then we would want to smooth it out a bit more. So I'm using a fairly large balling tool to push in some eye sockets. And because I want him a bit angry looking or a bit grumpy, I'm pushing down sort of above the eye area on that one eye and slightly up from the bottom as well. I'm going to have to move that around a little bit when I put the eyeball itself in. Making a little indentation where I want the nose to go, so like a long triangle. And then let's put its mouth underneath. And we'll just shape around its mouth, just pushing in lightly. So because there's buttercream under the fondant, can you see it's still soft, and I'm able to push around the shape a little bit. So I've got a pale brown that we're just going to push in that gap for the nose. Put a little line up the middle. And then I'm going to use the other wider end of my Dresden tool to just push in 2 nostrils, like so. And I've got some white fondant for the eyeballs. Just roll them so they just fit in those eye sockets that you've put in. You might want bigger eye sockets or smaller eye sockets. It really is up to you. It just changes the look of the character, just changing the size of the eyes. So you're going to push them in both, and then you can texture your fondant. Excuse my scruffy jumper that I'm wearing. You can use a metal Dresden or plastic Dresden. There's loads of different tools you can use to actually create this. I quite like the plastic one. The metal one's really good for it if I want to cut through the fondant a bit more. I can't make up my mind. You'll see I swap between. But anything, you could use the end of a knife as long as you don't press too hard because you don't want to puncture through to the cake too much. And we're keeping the hairlines fairly short near the nose and mouth area and sort of going up between the eyes. And then as we come further out, the hairlines are getting longer so that it looks like the hair's a bit longer all the way around. And you can spend a little while on this, but bear in mind the longer you do take, the more the fondant is going to dry on the outside and it's going to crack a bit. So don't spend several hours putting the hair in. I've just stuck it to my board with a little bit of buttercream. Just make sure you don't push it too high up on your board because you won't have space for your ears. And for the eyes, I'm going to use some circles. So I've used the leftover of the brown that I had for the nose. And then a smaller disc of black. We'll put them together and then we'll stick those in the eyes. I haven't put them on with anything. In case they're the wrong size and I want to pull them off, if I'd put glue, or edible glue that is, or water down, it just makes it harder to remove it. And sometimes you find the fondant sticky enough that it stays on there itself. So I want to enhance the eyebrow a little bit more. So I've just added an extra piece of the latte colour so it goes over the eyeball a little bit. And I've got some black fondant. I've rolled it fairly thin, especially at either end. And that's just going to go around the outside edge of the eye. It doesn't quite go all the way around. I didn't want it to go all the way around, so I want it to be thicker on the outside edge. And then I'm just going to try and squeeze it another bit in the gap on the other eye. It's a bit trickier on the eye where he's kind of scowling a bit. Let's add a bit more colour. So these are edible pens that I'm using now, guys. Please don't use a normal felt pen. If it's not dark enough to go over your brown, you can just use a little bit of black on there. Lots of little lines coming from the outer edge inwards, just so the colour's not quite as flat on there. And then we want a tiny ball of white fondant for the highlight in the eye. And let's use the edible pens again. Now, if you don't have edible pens, you can just use food colouring painted on. That's absolutely fine. So we're going to go around the outer edge of the nose as well as the gap in the mouth. Let's just give him some ears. So if your fondant is very soft, you might find you want to add a little bit of CMC or Tylose to it just to firm them up. Now, if the ears are going to be flat against your cake board, you're not going to need CMC or Tylose. But if you're planning on having them sticking upwards or out at all, then they just want that in to firm up your fondant a little bit. So I'm starting with some triangles. And I'm kind of folding them over a little bit. And then if you hold them against the cat's head so you can see the size, and then you know if you want to trim some more off. So you see, after I've folded it over, I trim a little bit off and trim at an angle so that it fits on the side of its head. And then you can play around with the shape a little bit when you've got them on there as well. I've pressed it quite firmly against the side of the cat's head. And then we're going to put some little lines in so it matches with the fur everywhere else. I haven't put as many on the ears because I didn't want to knock them out of place when I was doing the hairlines. Okay, so let's make this guy a big bow because he looks unhappy about something. So I feel like he should be wearing a big, nice, pretty pink bow that he's not happy about wearing. So I've got a long strip. Now, the width of your strip is going to determine how big the bow looks. And obviously the length as well is going to change it. So you can go as big or small as you want with this. So I've folded it so either end is in the middle. And then we're going to kind of concertina it a bit there in the centre, pushing it together. And then let's roll a little piece to go around the middle. Just putting a couple of indentations in so it looks folded, but I don't have to actually fold it on this middle bit. And it's just going to go against him just there. You might find, like mine, if it hangs really far off the board, that you need to let it set and firm up a little bit first before you stick it in place. So I've just put it to one side and I'm going to do a bit of painting while I'm waiting for that bow to firm up. Now the bow was actually modelling paste, guys, not fondant, so it's a little bit firmer than what I've used on the cake itself. Now, food colours for this, I'm just using the edible powders. Again, I'll link below what colours I've used. And I've mixed them with the dipping solution, and you can use clear alcohol. It evaporates, so you're not left with any alcohol on the cake. I've diluted it quite a lot. So the more you dilute it, the more runny it is, the more it's just going to go between those lines that we drew. So can you see it's kind of going into the gaps, which is where I want it to look darker. Now, the thicker I have the paint, so the more powder compared to liquid that I use, the less it's going to drip into those hair marks and the more it will just stay on the surface. So go with it quite liquid at first, and then you can gradually add more powder the more you want it to show and stand out. And also you can change the colour of the powder. So you can see around here, I've got a lot of black in for the mouth area, but I've also added a tiny bit of brown powder as well. And then you can see that for the inside of the ears, we used a pale pink. Again, quite diluted. And then I've got some white. So this is the white edible powder. I'm putting this one on dry. So I've got a bigger brush and I'm just dusting it anywhere that I want to look a little bit lighter. And then you can paint it on with it as a paint anywhere that you want a little highlight. So just put a very tiny bit on the nose. I'm actually going to use some of that leftover latte coloured fondant to just lift this area under the face. So it looks a bit like his body, and I can sit the bow on this as well. Also adding more hairline. So I'm going to have to paint this so that it matches with the face as well. But let's stick that bow on. So I am just using water. It looks a bit discoloured because I've been rinsing the food colour brushes in there. So it is all edible, the stuff on there. Now, till it dries, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick some blocks of fondant under there just to prop it up in place. Once that's dried, that will stay and I'll be able to remove those blocks of paste. And then let's just quickly add a bit of colour to this. So you can see nice and runny, it's dripping between those lines, like so. And we'll just finish him off with some whiskers. So I actually used the noodles. Is it vermicelli noodles? I think that's what they're called. I'll put links below anyway to what it is I used. For ages I didn't bother with whiskers on my animals, and in my Facebook lives you guys used to suggest all the time trying like the really thin rice noodles. So I've given them a go and I like them. I think they worked really well. Obviously they're the wrong colour, so I'm just using the edible powders mixed with the dipping solution again, or clear alcohol, just to paint over the top of them. So there we go, he's all finished. So this is the second of the cat face cakes I've made. You can find the other one on my YouTube channel as well. And it's very similar to the Clawhauser one, so you might want to have a little check out of that one too. And I've also got a Chloe cake that's 3D as well if you want to check that one out, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more weekly videos. Thanks, bye. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram and more.